Hey everybody, I'm with my friend Tanesha Townsell. She's a counselor, started experiencing Eden 3 years ago, and today we're covering a litany of topics like we usually do, talking about emotional and spiritual health and what the Bible has to say about psychology, about counseling. We're talking about church hurt and the likes. I hope that you like today. I think you really will. All right, so Tanesha, it's really nice to have you. I've been looking forward to our conversation.
Yeah,
Thanks so
same
much for
here.
coming in.
Thanks for inviting me.
Every time I see you, I feel that, man, that is a lady who she really knows and sees the truth, but you have a nurturing aspect about you as well. So I feel like you can hold that. I can tell the truth, but I can also tell it in a way that is soft, gentle, that people can hear. And I've just, through our conversations, always loved that about you.
Wow. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Absolutely.
I don't know if everybody would say that, but
Oh, really? Do you find yourself pretty direct or what?
yes, and people do. That's
Yeah.
one of the reasons I think that God has used me in this ministry because I have to say the hard stuff and not care if you like me after or not. But I have had people come back and say, you really made me mad when you said that, but I thank you, because I went home and thought about it or I couldn't shake it.
Yeah.
So what you said, making sure that I speak the truth in love has been my go-to. I have to say this hard stuff. I see it, how can I make this person be open to it as much as I can?
Yeah.
So,
well, personally, I love it because I never have to worry about what you might be thinking. I feel like you would tell me, like I just feel that, but it is, so do you ever have any issues like caring what people think about you? Did that?
I used to.
Yeah, used to? Okay.
Yeah, that used to be, I used to feel really bad if I was rejected or people say, I don't want to come back to you, you know?
Sure.
But now it's like, well, I realize I can't help everybody. There's 1,001 counselors out there and there's somebody for everybody.
Right.
So me recognizing who is assigned to me and who's not.
Yeah. How did you come to that? Long story short for me, the pandemic really beat that out of me, because we couldn't make anybody happy.
Yeah.
You do one thing over here and this person's happy, but this person is upset. And you're like, well, can't we all just get along? Like, this doesn't make any sense to me, And I realized, like, people are going to carry their opinions no matter what, but I just have to be true to, like, who God's called me to be and be that. It's a longer story than that for sure, but man, I would say I was an approval addict, and then you take the approval away. And it really did things in guys like me and pastors, all around. Yeah. So did that happen to you at some point? Did you have a moment?
Yeah, during the pandemic or just in general?
That just like really predicated you, just like, I'm free from other people's expectations of me.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of an example I can give. Everything's confidential in counseling.
Right, yeah.
I'm trying to give a general example.
And I appreciate that because I've been with counselors at some point where they would just tell me everything. And I'm like, wait a second, that is not professional at all.
No.
So I appreciate that.
No. And you know what? I have been on the counseling couch, I guess, at a time in my life. And I always think of how would I want somebody to counsel me?
Right.
And also people that I counsel, I look at, that could be my brother, my sister, my son, my daughter, so how would I want someone to minister to them?
Yes.
So that helps. But back to your question about the approval thing, it's difficult because I think we are all designed to be affirmed. We serve a God who wants to be praised, right? And we're created in his image. So praise helps us, to feel like we have value, that we have worth. But when it comes to being disapproved, I guess, it helps me to reflect, okay, well, was I trying to do more than what I was assigned to do with this person? Maybe I'm not the waterer or the planter, and me staying focused on my assignment and realizing that you're not going to please everybody and just being okay with that. And I have to remind myself, Tanesha, you're not going to please everybody. They hated Jesus. He didn't please everybody. And when I think about that, it helps me. Like, okay, Lord, well, if they didn't like you, if you didn't please everybody, then who do I think I am that I have to? So I hope that answered your question.
I think there was a moment. This is kind of silly, but there's a when I realized I think I got into pastoral ministry because I wanted to solve everybody's problems, you know, and like I can't solve everybody's problems, and so when the Lord takes that like codependence out of you, you know, you're like, why did I get into this again? You know, and it takes you back to the heart though of the reason, you know. It's we're in it to help people.
Right.
Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it ends in disappointment, and but most of the time it's awesome, you know, to really it's an honor, you know, to walk with people in the best of days and the worst of days, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And you do that well. How long have you been how long have you been counseling in general?
Maybe about 16 years.
16 years. Okay. And we were talking earlier about how you got into it. Somebody believed in you.
Yes.
You know?
Yes.
You had an undergrad in journalism.
I did.
Okay.
Yeah. Yep. Working toward journalism. And I just knew that I was going to be this journalist, either the next Oprah or on CNN.
Yeah.
Right. Which was funny because I knew I wanted a family, and family is very important to me. So I was trying to think of how I was going to juggle that lifestyle. So that professor coming into the class that day telling us that this field is going to be obsolete and nobody's going to pick up a newspaper, nobody's going to care because they want to have phones where you can just go on and Google any information that you need. So you might want to consider another career path.
Wow. Yeah.
And it was an awakening for me because since 8th grade, I had been working towards being a journalist. So I had to shift my thinking, like, what in the world am I going to do now? And I didn't know. So I did what was comfortable, I feel, at that moment. Well, I have these journalism credits. What can I do to not waste them? And education was a stable career, you know. Teachers is a stable, you know, and I like to teach. So I said, well, that seems like the next best thing. So I feel like I kind of settled, but God had a plan, and I had to go through all of that to get to where he was taking me.
Right.
So.
And it's interesting, you know, you have the vision of, you know, big, and then we look at our vision now and we say, well, that's not as big sometimes, right? But it actually is when you're right in the middle of God's plan for your life. That's really what success is, right?
Yeah. Sometimes that's scary. You don't know.
Right.
You know, because like you said, we have this great vision of, like you said, speaking to the masses and fixing people and helping people. Well, that's not my job to fix anybody.
Right.
You know, and I think how what we do mingles is that we are to push people toward dependency on Christ,
right?
Whether it's as a pastor or as a counselor. And I have to keep that in mind. Like, I'm not here to fix anybody. And I tell clients that. Sometimes they say, well, counseling's not working for me. That's fine. You have to work it.
Yeah.
You have to work what you learn, whether it's in a sermon, whether it's in a Sunday school class, or whether it's in a counseling session. You have to take the information that you receive and make it work for you.
Right.
So releasing ourselves from that responsibility.
Right.
You know, is important.
Yeah. When we talk about that just a little bit, it would be really great to unpack that just a little bit more though. But like when it comes to the Bible and science and psychology, like I'm thinking about where we are right now as just in our culture. I read a statistic recently. It's like 1 in 4 18 and older in the United States is diagnosed with an anxiety. Either I think it's anxiety or anxiety disorder of some sort. We all know like the issues going on with mental health within young people, and a lot of people pushed back on counseling psychology throughout the years. I mean, in early church history, there was a direct fight between counseling, between psychology. And I see that. I as a studier of history, I see that, you know, there's psychology has been really infused in the school. Like God has been pulled out. Psychology essentially has become God. And so a lot of times I think believers approach this as like they're at enmity with one another. Yeah. But really what you're saying is like they don't have to be, right?
No.
Yeah.
Not at all.
So what is the balance of living for God, of counseling, of mental health, of all of that biblically? Like,
yeah, well, the Bible talks about transforming and renewing our mind.
Right. Yeah.
So for a Christian, you know, we don't just hear the gospel and become this awesome Christian. You know, that's just the beginning. You know, the Bible talks about Jesus being a door. And I didn't really understand. I was like, what do you mean a door? But he's the way in. But the kingdom is beyond that. He's the way to go through. You know, so we have to, once we accept salvation, then it's our responsibility to renew our mind and changing our mindset, our thinking pattern, the way we think, and adjusting to that. So, you know, that's how you marry psychology and the Bible, you know, and we're not at odds. It's actually, there's psychology found all throughout Scripture.
Right.
You know, the Bible talks about us having the mind of Christ. Well, what does that mean? Because some days I don't feel like I do, you know, but that's a promise that we have once we have accepted him. So I have to allow his mind to grow in me.
Right.
So getting those things that are not of the kingdom mindset out of me and tapping into more of what he has given me. But that takes study, that takes renewal, that takes humility, realizing that I don't have all the answers. Yeah. And the way that I've been thinking, you know, is not good. It hasn't gotten me in the best places. So I hope that answers.
Right. It's question. Like reject the lie, replace it with truth. And that is the biblical, that's the biblical mandate. You know, we're reading the word and renewing our minds. I love how you say that. That really is the goal of counseling, right?
Yeah.
So do you try to identify the lie within people?
Oh,
the
absolutely.
Is that a core amount? Is that a lot of what you do? Like,
yes, that's the main thing, because people come in. We may, you know what I learned? I learned that we make inner vows to ourselves.
Inner vows. Okay.
Yeah, inner vows. And what, like, here's an example. Let's say you've been hurt in church. Yeah. You know, and it's like, well, I'm just never going back. I'm not going to do ministry. We make those vows to ourselves. And sometimes we're more faithful to that than we are to what God says we are and who we are and what we can overcome. So we are so married to our pain and the conclusions that we have come to as a result of our pain that we can't break out of that and we feel stuck. So a lot of what I do is I identify, okay, let me see where this person got stuck. Let me see if there are any inner vows they've made to themselves or to others, you know, and then kind of chip away at that, but replacing that with what God says and not just learning what he says, but how do we walk it out? Yeah. That's the faith part, you know, because a lot of us believe God and his word, but we don't trust it for ourselves, you know. And how do we know is what do we do when we get into those tight spots? You know, what are our go-tos? Where do we lean? And that's a key to what we lean on is a key to what we trust in. You know, so getting people to transform their minds. The challenge is that, you know, we are Christian counseling. And like I told you before, we don't just see Christians. Matter of fact, I think maybe 50% of our caseload may be Christian. So the challenge is, okay.
Do you let them know, like, we're Christian counseling, or one of my friends has an option. Do you want me to counsel you from the Christian perspective or from a secular perspective? Like, how do you navigate that?
Yeah. So we don't hide that we're Christian, but we don't. It's not in lights. So, you know, when you call us, you know, we're found on Ezekiel 36:35. So the scripture is on our paperwork, you know, if you're paying attention. Of course, experiencing Eden, where did that come from? Right. You know, when we do an initial intake, we do a biopsychosocial spiritual model. So what that is if somebody,
sounds complicated.
I know it does. It's really easy though.
Yeah.
Let's say you come in with anxiety. Okay. So we look at all 4 areas. Well, what's going on with you physically? Are you seeing your doctor? How are you sleeping? Or how do you eat?
That's common sense.
You know, do you exercise? We look at that, and then we look at psychologically, do you have any history of anxiety in your family? Did your mom deal with it? Did your father? And what did you learn from that? Were they medicated? And then socially, how do you interact with others? What are your relationships like with your coworkers, your family members? And then spiritually, So most secular counselors only do a biopsychosocial model.
Okay.
We add the spiritual component. So we say, well, and I just say, what does spirituality mean to you? That's my concern.
Okay.
And they say, well,
you probably get so many different answers.
Yes. Wow. From crystals to candles to I'm a Satanist.
Yeah,
I get everything.
Yeah.
Or I grew up Catholic and I just it didn't do anything for me, so I'm not. So that right there tells me where people are and where to start with. So I don't push. I tell people I'm not here to convert you, but I'm just here to see. I want to know how what you believe is working out for you. How does that help your anxiety?
Right.
And
that's
hopefully
that is a great question.
Yeah, and hopefully it'll
people
open
start to
you up.
self-assess then at that point when you ask them like how maybe it's my beliefs then like they start just jump in, they start to understand.
Wow. Yeah, absolutely. Some people are resistant.
Right.
Some people that pay attention that we're Christians, sometimes they just come with walls up.
Right.
Well, I know what you're going to say, so we're careful to not say, well, the Bible says,
right.
But the principles we can still apply.
Yes.
And we can still use, so, yeah.
Some of the principles that are, it blows my mind. Like, I mean, in the world right now, it's manifesting is like, becoming extremely popular from football stars that just get drafted. There's a young man. He's like, his mom said he manifested this since he was little. It's actually like a kind of a biblical, like stolen from the Bible, though. There's actual power in our words, right?
It is.
Do you see that? You were talking about the vows earlier. When people say things about themselves over and over, they're just driving that belief down in their heart, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Do you have to deal with that a lot with people's words?
Absolutely. I don't know. There's a common phrase that's going around. People have this Jesus moment.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know if you've heard that.
A little bit, yeah.
I've had this, come to Jesus moment. That's what it is, right? And that just sometimes bothers me. I'm like, well, a come to Jesus moment is real.
Yeah.
Right? So
they're just, it's like a colloquialism to them. They're just like throwing it out there.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
So sometimes you can take that and say, well, what does the come to Jesus moment mean?
Right.
What would that look like for you in this situation?
Right.
And who is Jesus? Is he real? Just kind of getting them to think of, what do I think about Jesus? Is it, he's just some like a pop star, and getting them to hear themselves and things that they say and reflecting back, well, I heard you say, come to Jesus. Have you ever had one? What does it look like?
Yeah.
Yeah. So using what people are thinking to get them to see if they're on the right track or if that's contributing to some of the depression, anxiety.
Yes.
Things like that.
Yeah, because the words and thoughts, they solidify that in our hearts. We have to be extremely careful about that.
Yeah.
Did you see an uptick in need for counseling around the pandemic? How did you manage that?
Absolutely. During the pandemic, when the whole world was shut down, people were forced to be in the house with people that they live with.
Yeah.
And they realized, this is challenging, this is difficult. I don't know. First it started out as, I get to be home and, the world is shut down. This is wonderful.
Yeah.
But I think maybe a week or so into that, it was like, this is terrible. I have to get out of here, and then people were forced to deal with some of their issues that they may have been ignoring because they were so busy.
Yes.
And then you had people that live alone, a lot of elderly, where they were forced to deal with their own thoughts. There was no connection. And, we are created to connect, to be relational. So that was difficult for a lot of people. However, I believe that it had some pros where it caused us to come out of the box and to be intentional about ways of connecting that we may not have thought about before. So people were doing a lot of Zooms. They were being creative with their family, game nights, really connecting with their kids now,
I'm sure that actually helped you too from a clinical perspective too, because now you could Zoom clients. It was a little bit more I don't know, just a little bit more open now, right?
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
yeah, but is that harder for you though? Because what I found is I lead Zoom meetings. I'm trying to figure out what people are feeling. The emotional
Yeah.
side of it is actually a little bit. You carry a lot of emotional weight,
Yeah.
anyways, by nature of what you do.
Yeah.
Like, how do you manage that?
Yeah, I prefer in person.
Yeah.
Because you can read body language better, and it's just more personable.
You ever read the statistic? I don't know, it feels like an 8-hour workday whenever you are on Zoom for 4 hours in meetings.
Yeah,
You know?
it's tough. It's tough. And another thing is that I'm not in control of their environment.
Right.
So
okay.
you come into the office, nobody's going to bus in.
Yeah.
We have a sound machine. Nobody's going to eavesdrop. So people tend
Right.
to let their guard down.
Yeah.
When I have a lot of in person, I tell people now I can control the environment where I am, but it's up to you. And I've had husbands bus in,
Yeah.
people in their bedroom, their dog, their cat,
Yeah.
so that makes it difficult and challenging. But it also, there's pros and cons to everything. People feel more comfortable in their home.
Right.
I don't have to go out, counseling, there's a stigma that comes with it. There's always been, where if you go to counseling, something's wrong.
Right.
So if people see you, going into an office, it's like, they have anxiety with that. Who am I going to run into in the waiting room, or so you have those challenges as well. So I like the fact that we can do both and the client can choose. Mm-hmm. During the pandemic, there was no choice. It was if you need help, you have to do virtual. And everybody was home.
Yeah.
So it was a child counsel people while they were in their cars, at Starbucks, in the parking lot, in the park.
Yeah.
So you have those challenges that come with it.
Yeah. Was it major? Did you deal with more depression? Did you deal with more relational stuff during that time?
Depression, absolutely, because we didn't know what was going on in the world. I've never lived through a pandemic.
Right.
So it was something like, is the world really shutting down?
Yeah.
And then you had people that were concerned about their health. People were dying. It was a very challenging period.
Can you help me understand that? Like with depression, we say that. What I'm noticing a lot of times is there's buzzwords, and there's I'm a little bit more of a simple guy, right? Like I just kind of want to get to the core of it. So when somebody says, the word abuse, or if somebody says depression, or it's like, okay, but what was that? What really happened? And what really is that? Like, is there a difference between clinical depression, like somebody is like, or somebody's has depressed feelings? How would you describe that? So
good question. There's something called adjustment disorder. So let me give you an example. Let's use the pandemic. So the pandemic it was a period that we had to adjust to, whether we like to or not. However, in the process of that adjustment, you and I may handle it differently. Where I may become depressed and sad, like, I don't like this. Where you may say, well, I'm going to look for an opportunity to prosper in this adjustment. Okay. So you can have adjustment disorder with depressed mood, adjustment disorder with anxiety, or both, right? So it's how we adjust to different situations in our life. However, it's not, if the situation changes, then our depression will be alleviated, or our anxiety. Clinical depression is a little bit more serious. It's not based on what we're adjusting to. It's, I'm sad all the time, every day. I can't get out of bed. It's impairing me, and I can't work. I can't think. All I can think about is how sad and how it would be better to not be here. That's more of a clinical depression.
That makes a lot of sense. So more people probably struggled with the adjustment depression during that time, I'm assuming. How do you help somebody through that?
Through adjustment?
Yeah.
Getting them to focus on the positives.
Yeah.
Getting beside them, supporting them. What's your mindset? So if this situation is causing you to feel depressed, and it could be anything like, I have to relocate. And I don't want to.
Right.
Okay, well, let's look at some positives. Let's go on and look at where you're locating. What are your interests? So connecting with people where they are, their strengths, and helping them. You can overcome this. What supports do you need?
Right.
How can we best support you through this adjustment until you feel better about it?
Are these skills that people just didn't grow up learning?
Probably.
A lot of times, Yeah. probably.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Yeah, yeah.
I have difficulty adjusting to
Yeah,
things, you know.
yeah,
So
yeah. And so does that have to do with grief then? You know?
grief is a part of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, we tend to look at grief as only losing someone.
Right.
But no, a job change, we can grieve over that.
Yeah, the relationships that change with that. And
Yeah.
Yeah, the times we might feel misunderstood in that job change, right?
Yeah,
Or,
absolutely.
you know, I really loved being in this area, this spot, and you have to move, right? Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So you have helped people all over the spectrum. What are some of the major themes that you're starting to see in our culture right now, just from a mental health perspective?
Major themes. Wow.
Is there anything big that you can pick out that you can just be like, man, this is...
I would have to say anxiety. We live in a
Yeah.
culture that's just everybody's so anxious. They're fearful. They are overwhelmed. I'm starting to see, and actually I read an article last night about our healthcare industry. I see a lot of nurses and doctors, and they are overwhelmed, especially since the pandemic.
Yeah, yeah.
They've had to work through that. Nothing changed for them.
Yeah.
There's staffing shortages, and it's just they don't know how to navigate their own stuff.
It
and
blows my
carrying-
mind. Yeah, I'm with you. Keep going. I'm sorry.
Yeah, they don't know how to navigate helping others
Yeah.
and being in that field, and then having to go home and be a mom, a wife, a dad.
Right.
You know, and then losing someone.
Yeah.
You know, you're taking care of a patient, and the patient doesn't make it, and you're just supposed to pick up and go help the next and go home and drink a cup of coffee. It's like, no,
Right.
I need to talk about what happened. I couldn't save that child. I couldn't save that person that came in that was in an accident. And they're finding that they don't have the necessary support that they needed. So one of the things I'm grateful for is a lot of organizations have tapped into what they call an employee assistance program.
Okay.
And a lot of our clients we are contracted with a lot of EAPs is what we call them. And a lot of organizations are recognizing the importance of mental health
Yes.
and keeping their employees healthy. So jobs will pay 1 or 2 or 3 sessions, even 10, for their employees to come and get help that they need to be able to do their job.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Going to be as a pastor, you know, with people in the best of times and the worst of times. And sometimes I'm there with, I remember one situation in particular, we had a young girl who had lost her life, and her parents were on the way in, and I had to tell the parents. And as I walked through the emergency room to get to the room, and she just happened to be in the very back, I got to just look at everyone in the room and the weight that they were carrying. It was like, they were never meant to carry this weight. They were never meant to carry this weight. And I remember thinking, these people need help after seeing this. They need some help after this. They need support. And I called them the next day just to check in. And the nurse who was the head nurse, she was back, and she said, no one has ever asked if we've been okay. Thank you so much for that. It just meant the world to them.
Yeah.
But from that, I thought, you know, they're overrun. They're overworked right now.
Yeah.
And the things that they see day to day, going back and drinking a cup of coffee, like
Yeah.
just go back. You can't just, after seeing those things, you can't just go back to normal.
Yeah.
How do you help somebody through that?
Just be there for them.
Yeah.
You know, it sounds simple, you know, but
understand
what
that.
you
Yeah.
did, exactly what you did, you recognize and acknowledging, hey, understand you're human too.
Right.
You know, how are you feeling? Checking
Yeah.
in with them. What is this doing for you?
Yeah.
What do you think about life?
Yeah.
You know, there are a lot of people in healthcare that don't believe in God.
Yeah.
They don't, because they look at it as, well, how could God allow this?
Yes.
You know, and they're so scientifically evidence-based that
Yes.
they don't see, you know, faith doesn't come into play.
Do you go there with them in conversation?
It doesn't go well.
Doesn't go well. Why not?
It does not go well because they're super smart.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're super smart and intelligent, and, you know, they've been trained to gain evidence from, you know, or gain their belief system from the evidence. So it's hard to incorporate faith into that.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes a
You
lot
know,
of sense. Yeah.
so
Yeah. But they still need support.
they still need support. Still need support. So I'm there. I'm here.
Yeah.
And I pray that they have an encounter, even if you don't believe. And I pray some crazy prayers. After those sessions, I just say, Lord, don't let them rest until they find you.
Yeah.
Make them uncomfortable at night.
Yeah.
Something that was said, I pray those kind of prayers and I leave it alone. I used to beat myself up like, man, they didn't believe. What did I do wrong? But you can only do but so much. Our job is to present the gospel.
Right. And so you don't mind that. You don't mind presenting the gospel in those times. Because I've talked with a lot of counselors and they're like, this is who I am, but I can separate from who I am in this. And
I don't know how to separate from that. I don't know how to do that. I just don't. Yeah.
That's why I think I like talking with you. Because I'm like, wait a second. You're the same person in every room, right? Like, you have to be, right?
Yeah.
This is who I am.
Yeah. I try to turn the counselor off. My kids are sometimes like, Mom, can you please don't counsel us? I'm like, I try to turn it off.
One of your kids that I'm very close with told me that one time.
I'm sure you did.
He was like, you just get a counselor. And I had to tell her that.
Yes.
That's so funny, man.
Yes.
That's so funny.
Yes.
So, how do you navigate that with your kids? You got to turn it off?
Yeah, it's tough. It's tough. We had one of our
look at them a little different. You ask them a question. They're like, I know what you're doing right now.
Yeah, absolutely. We had a daughter who was going through a bout with depression, and I didn't see it.
Oh, okay.
I did not see it, or maybe I did see it, and I kind of brushed over it. Oh, she'll get through this. This will pass, And then I felt bad when it came out. I'm like, what do you mean? Nobody deals with depression in here. We're counselors, So that was tough, being able to walk her through that. But I had to be mom first.
Yeah.
Actually, I don't think I counseled her at all. Right. I just was mom.
Yes.
So that was a tough moment. That was an eye-opener. Like, I remember someone telling me in early days of ministry, you can't step over ministry to do ministry. And, you can't, your household comes first.
Right.
And I think I took...
That's profound, yeah.
Yeah, I think I took for granted that, my kids know that I'm here if they need me. Mm-hmm. They know how to, but you have to check in with them.
Yeah.
And what you see, address it.
Yeah.
They'll get through it. No, so that was an eye-opener for me. So I'm always checking in. I try to with all of them, even the grown ones, how's it going? I'm still here,
Yes.
So, and sometimes it's hurtful when they don't come to you. It's like, why didn't you tell me about that? Like, so.
Yeah, I know. I was having that conversation with my daughter last night.
Really?
Like, hey, I've been here the whole time. Let's go. It was simple homework. It was actually, journalism. I was helping her with her grammar, know, and she's like, we're walking through it, and I'm like, you got a test here, and it's a take-home test. You don't know anything on this. Like, I'm here, baby. Like, why didn't you tell me about all this?
Yeah.
Like, come on, let's get it. So we stayed up late and got it done. But
yeah,
but I feel you on that. Like, you can't step up for ministry, to do ministry. It's so true.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's like kind of haunting though, with our kids. So with our kids, we have, for the sake of the conversation here, 3 biological kids, 2 foster kids right now, and we have to, it's like my job to point them to Jesus first, and that can be a daunting task sometimes. Do your kids always receive from you whenever you want to? No. No. So you feel it.
And you have to get creative.
Yeah.
You have 5 now, and, we raised 6.
Yeah.
So they're all different.
Yes.
All different. You think, okay, I got this parenting thing down. The next one will throw you off.
Yeah.
It's like love languages. They all have different love languages.
Yes.
So you have
Hilarious.
you have to take time to learn what their love language is and just love them through.
Yeah.
So this idea of walking beside them and supporting them, I really try to do that more than coming as a parent.
Yes.
Because that can be intimidating. And I don't want them, I always told the Lord, I want them to have their own relationship with you.
Yeah.
I don't want them to say, well, I got to go to church because that's what I was raised to do. I want them to have a connection, their own relationship. And sometimes we can get in the way of that as parents. Our job is to lead them and teach them, but we don't want to force anything.
Yes.
And it's hard navigating that at times because you see things and you know things and it's like, oh, don't go that way. I wouldn't do that. So we have to be careful.
How does your relationship with your kids change over time? I notice a lot of times parents will want to coach, even when their kids get into their 30s. They're like still telling them to say thank you. How does that change?
Oh, I don't know if it does.
Yeah.
That's a good question. How does it change?
I saw Dobson put out there a long time ago, coach, counselor, consultant, colleague.
Mm-hmm.
And I've thought about that through the years. It's like, I'm sure with the oldest, you're a little bit more friends. And then with the youngest, it's like, I've got to remind you to brush your teeth at night, and along the spectrum. Is there any purposeful practices that you have to keep that relationship strong? Because your relationship is strong with all your kids.
I hope so.
You.
I hope so.
Oh, they love you.
Yes. Yeah, I hope so.
Yes.
Recognizing their strengths. And I used to parent from a critical, want you to get good, you need to do better. Recognizing your weaknesses, you need to be strong. My husband,
a little truth bent can lean that way.
Yeah.
My wife reminds me of that too.
Yeah.
The critical parent, don't be critical.
Yes. And I grew up in that, so I had to unlearn some things. Even when I see it, I have to look for the positive.
Yeah.
Maybe they didn't do all the dishes, but you wiped off the counter. That's awesome. Thank you.
Does that feel disingenuous though?
Well, no, it forces me to focus and look for the positive.
Yeah.
Instead of, because I'm used to looking for what you didn't do.
Yeah.
And that can get discouraging at times.
Well, that's good advice for me. I'm like, I'm changing the way that I'm framing this and I'm looking at it as opposed to lying.
Yeah. But
so you're looking for the positive.
Yeah, and letting them know that I believe in you.
Yeah.
I believe in the God in you. Give you an example. I was praying to God about what I was telling you. Lord, do our kids really trust you and have a relationship with you? And right after I prayed that, one of our children went into a store in the mall and stole some AirPods. I would have never thought this kid would have done that. And it was right after I prayed that. And I was like,
another one?
I was like, oh my gosh. And when I was actually in the mall getting my hair done, and the kid had went to go wander and, while I was getting my hair done. And then I get a call from security. They're like, oh, are you Miss Townsell? I'm like, yes. And they're like, we have your kid down here, I'm like, is everything okay? She took some AirPods, and but this is the thing. She took them and turned around and took them back.
Oh, wow.
And that's how she got caught. And of course, I'm like, oh, I'm going to get her. I can't believe she would do that, And the Holy Spirit reminded me, well, what was your prayer? You wanted to know if they are in tune, if they have their own relationship. And the Holy Ghost reminded me.
Yeah.
It was the conviction that made her go back. She got away with it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I was like, okay, Lord, but I wasn't talking about that. That's not what I wanted.
Well, in the legal area next time,
Exactly. But I think that was an eye-opener for me because it taught me to trust the seed that has been planted.
Right, yeah.
And
train up a child in the way they should go. In the end, they won't depart from it. So
and they're going to make mistakes.
Return to it.
Yeah, they're going to make mistakes.
Yes. How many do we make?
Exactly, and still make, So
I think sometimes I'm a little bit harsh in the areas that I wish somebody would have talked to me and coached me in. And specifically if one is not open to reason in that area. I'm like, don't you know how bad I wanted somebody to tell me that?
Did you know that at the time, though?
At the time? What you mean?
That you wanted correction in that area? Or did you know what you needed?
No, I would say generally I knew what I needed. So specifically... if I would embarrass myself by certain, just kind of saying whatever came to my mind, I probably need to learn a lesson about not just saying whatever comes to my mind, right? But the coaching along the way, I didn't really know that I needed that, if that makes sense. Like,
Okay.
just, I feel embarrassed. Probably would have known I shouldn't have said that. Probably would have been nice if I knew that.
Okay.
You know? And now looking back, I'm like, oh man, like, no, I really could have learned these lessons, you know? It's a little bit more specific now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Was that the same for you, or?
Yeah, there were times that I said things, 'cause remember I was telling you, I have a reputation of being very direct at times.
Yeah.
That it can almost come off cold and harsh.
Sure,
and I know
yeah.
that
Yeah.
about myself.
Yeah.
So I have to work hard at speaking the truth in love.
Yeah.
But there were some times that I did it purposely.
Okay,
And I'm like,
yeah.
I'm gonna let you know how I feel.
Right.
You
right.
know?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I saw the damage that it did to people.
Yeah.
And sometimes I think back, I'm like, oh, you know, even though what I was thinking and
Yes.
saying may have been correct, just recognizing where they were at the time and what words are powerful.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, I could have said that differently, or I could have pulled them to the side, you know. And I think about that, you know, in the early days of parenting, you know, I'm like, oh, I wish I would have just done some things differently, you know. But my kids are so merciful and so gracious.
Yeah,
They're
yeah.
like, you know, forgiving, you know, and I thank God for that.
Those apologies go a long way, you know?
Yeah.
I've had to apologize a lot.
Yeah,
you know?
me too.
I really have. Those words, it's in coaching our kids and speaking the truth in love to them, I found, you know, I really don't want to be the critical parent. You know, I don't want specifically my oldest to feel like, oh man, dad was always ragging on me for stuff, you
Yeah.
know. He carries the most pressure, I think, just because all the other kids, they follow him.
Yeah.
You know, he's like almost the emotional thermostat in our house
Yeah.
sometimes. And, you know, I can be tough on him. But so I've been thinking about that. So critical parents, do you see that a lot in counseling, like the healing of words parents spoke? Do you have to go there a lot?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you feel like a lot of people need, one of my mentors said, this generation just needs reparented, you know? Is it that extreme, or how do you work with that?
Reparented. Yeah. I think that knowing and learning that parents are dealing with their own stuff, and sometimes what we do is we project some of the things that we're going through on our kids. Even the critical part, you know, like if I see you doing something that I did and it going in the direction that I went, and I already was there and I want to help you through it,
Yes.
then I can be critical instead of being gracious. Like, well, I understand that this is your choice and this is the way that you're going. You know, I'm going to share my story with you, and I'm going to trust that you make the right decision instead of, well, you better do this and you
Right.
better go that way.
Yeah.
You know, there are clients that we see that are in careers because their parents pushed them that way.
Right.
Or pushed them to go to college, and
Yeah.
that's not what they wanted to do.
Yeah.
You know, or just recognizing their path is different and pushing them towards that instead of, well, I think that you need to do this. This will set you up financially. You know, you have to trust God.
Right.
You know, you give wisdom. And I like the fact that I like when children come to you and ask
Yeah.
instead of, well, I'm going to tell you what to do.
Yeah.
You know, so in that sense, reparenting, just being open to my way is not necessarily the way all
Right,
the
right.
time, and I can learn and I can adjust,
Yeah.
you know, in terms of what I'm learning about you.
I've seen a lot with people who are going through the counseling process. There is a learning of how to set boundaries, and sometimes those boundaries can be like blackmail, you know, like, oh, I'm going to do this, and then they're going to change their behavior. You know, I'm thinking of a child to parent behavior, a parent who might struggle with addiction, or a parent who might even struggle with some manipulative behavior or something like that, that might be a little bit more subtle, you know. Well, if I set this boundary, then it's going to change them, you know. And I feel like I've been working with a lot of people recently who have to deal with that. They have to figure out the appropriate level of boundaries. You know, the boundary I've been helping people to see is the boundaries for your heart.
Yeah.
It's not to change them.
Right.
Well, their decision is their decision, right? I don't know. Is there something in counseling where a lot of counselors, a lot of times these people will be counseled, and they'll be counseled for a really long time, and they're not getting any better even, you know?
Yeah.
But they're just setting boundaries and almost becoming obsessive with their pain in the past, you know?
Yeah.
What do you think causes that? If you see somebody having that stronghold, and their relationship with their family isn't getting better after a number of years.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, like you said, if you're setting boundaries to change somebody else's behavior, that's not going to work. The boundary is for us and is for you to be able to navigate, well, if they don't change, how am I going to relate to them?
Right.
It's not going to force me to come outside of myself. But, and I guess it would be easier to use an example. I guess a boundary would be, let me think. Okay, maybe, because we're in the season of parenting where we have grandchildren now. My oldest daughter has a son, and my older son has 2 kids. So sometimes it's challenging to not step in and say, well, maybe you should try this or try that, or this is the way we did it. It doesn't matter. This is their journey, so that's a boundary that I've set with myself. Now, if they come to me and say, well, this child is doing this, and they ask, then I'll offer that. But I can't force them to parent the way that I did, because my parenting wasn't always the best,
Right.
But that's a boundary that we have up. It's like, we're here if you need us, but these are your children, and you have to raise them, right?
Yeah.
So,
that's funny. You're setting the boundary on the other side, because usually it's the other, like, Mom, like, come on, Well, that's good. Well, that's healthy. Yeah. So,
I hope so.
Seems it. So you worked with a lot of people, helping people through church hurt. I don't know if you want to expound on that just a little bit more. What do you see? What are the commonalities of that?
So, like people coming in with expectations, or people recognizing their gifts and skills and using them, but not caring for their heart.
Yeah.
You see a lot of that.
Yeah. Transactional.
Yeah. You see a lot of that. And a lot of times people expect perfection from church leaders, ministries. And when they see otherwise, they leave with offense. And their eyes are no longer on the one who's perfect.
Right.
If it ever was, So getting them to separate what people do and who God is, and that we're all in this together. And even a church hurt is a part of growth as well. What are you going to do after you're hurt? Nobody talks about work hurt, family hurt, but why is church hurt an issue? Because of the expectation, I believe. People come to church not expecting to be hurt. They expect to be healed, but it's not in the people. It's being pointed to the one who is the healer. Right. And that's key.
Right. So is that how did that expectation form in people? Do you think that was self-induced by pastors?
Somewhat.
I didn't want to lead that, but somewhat.
Yeah.
Is there anything else?
Yeah. I think one of the things, we pastors used to do it all.
Yeah.
Have this mindset that, I'm doing all the teaching, I'm doing all the counseling, I'm doing all the preaching. Yeah. And if you have issues, come to me. And I think that has been a setup for even in pastors to have mental breakdowns. We know pastors that have committed suicide, that have walked away from the ministry, that have walked away from the faith because they have taken on that responsibility of fixing everybody. And you can't. We are to be shepherds, to guide, not to control. And I think that's part of it.
Yeah. When you even allude to the control aspect of it,
I'll give you an example. Let me give you an example. This mindset that before you make a major decision, you come to me to make sure that it's what you're supposed to be doing.
Right. The shepherding movement, or even like more subtle.
More subtle.
Yeah.
I remember our some transitions that we've had to this region. We're from Philadelphia, and then we were in Central PA for 7 years before coming here, and all of those decisions to transition were ministry related. And I remember some things that leaders that I trusted said, like, well, this is not God. This is your place of blessing. And that wasn't so. And even if that was so, allowing me to go through my process of trying to hear from the Lord.
Right.
And if I was wrong, then I learned from that. But you saying certain things to me to make me feel like, oh, I'm doing something wrong because you don't agree with it.
Right.
Right. Just things like that. You see people.
What was their motive, do you think?
Just didn't want to see us leave.
Yeah.
And that's another thing. We don't understand seasons
right.
in the church.
Right.
Transition's
a natural part of life.
Right. We don't, we think that some things are to last forever.
Yeah.
Or we don't understand how relationships shift. We don't move with that. So we can get offended if I'm not a part of your inner circle, or we used to go out for coffee all the time, and now you don't call me as much. Seasons change, assignments change, and it's okay as we grow and as we learn. We're all in this together, but we can still love one another.
Right.
I don't have to go to your church anymore, but I still love you. I still pray for you. And I hope you do the same for me.
Yeah.
So just different things like that, you hear a lot.
Yeah, yeah. And we try to say within our church culture, I don't want to create spiritual dependence. I don't want you to be solely dependent on me for your spiritual growth. Because if you are, you're in trouble because I'm working on mine, still developing, but with all of that, you're then removing people from that dependency for a pastor and putting it right back to its rightful place, being fully dependent on Jesus, right?
Yeah, that's the answer. Yeah. Because we're all responsible for our walk.
Yeah.
My pastor said this so great the other night in Bible study, that he's accountable before us, but we're responsible. He can't be responsible for our walk.
Right.
And that is so true. And it's the same in counseling. If the Lord allows you to come my way, I'm responsible I'm accountable to you to do what I've been called to do as a professional and as a sister or brother in Christ. But it's up to you, like salvation. It's free to all of us, but we're responsible to accept it.
Right.
So teaching people that, so if I come to your church and I become spiritually dependent on you, and let's say you have a bad day, right? And you don't speak to me, then I'm like, oh, he's a horrible pastor. He didn't even speak to me. He saw me in Walmart. I'm not going back to his church. Stuff like that happens all the time. It's so silly, but it happens, because we don't recognize that pastors are human.
Yeah.
And that they're dealing with the same things, not just our stuff, but their stuff too, and the rest of the congregation. So you guys carry a weight and responsibility. So getting sheep to see that part.
Yeah, yeah.
And I've been on both sides of it,
Yeah.
Leadership and church member. So I feel like I'm able to give balance to situations.
Right. And in leadership, it's funny because we, being friends with a bunch of pastors in the area, if somebody comes in and they're like bashing another church or another pastor, like, oh, you're not going to be like this pastor. I'm like, hey, that's my friend.
Yeah.
That never goes well.
I bet.
I wish I would have known that when I started the church.
Yeah.
Probably would have dealt with that and saved our heartache.
Yeah.
A little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah. Have you seen that in ministry?
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
What you guys live in Newcastle area?
We do.
Yeah.
Yes.
Is it territorial, or is everybody kind of friends there, or somewhere in between?
Somewhat. I think and we're learning the community. We've only been there for about 7 years.
Yeah.
It's not a huge community, but everybody knows each other.
Yeah.
I'm
in
learning.
Chippewa Pryor, right?
In Chippewa Pryor, yes.
Yeah.
So just learning. When we first got there, it seemed to be territorial, but I think the Lord is breaking that down and trying to cause more of a community in the faith. So I'm interested to see where it goes.
I'm noticing that all over the place. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's like denominations are kind of fallen away and relationship is really coming to the surface. And we're starting to recognize as pastors the gifts in other churches and like, oh, these guys are gifted at this and they're gifted at this, we're gifted at this, and be fine with it.
Yeah.
And now we can work together.
Right.
And even with the theological differences, there can still be unity and certainly honor and love.
Right.
You know, in all of those. So I really can look at people and be like, hey, that's my friend you're talking about.
Yeah.
You know, like this isn't going to work anymore, you know?
Yeah.
So
that's awesome. I'm glad you do that.
well, you gotta have friends, you know, you gotta have friends. We're cautious of those who don't have any friends around them, though, to be honest, you know. It's you have to have friends. Usually there's a reason if somebody doesn't have, you know, if they're
right.
like it's us against every other church. It's us against the world. Usually there's a reason it's that way, you know, and it's not because all the other churches have bad doctrine or hate people or are all bad, you know. It's pretty interesting. But church hurt is very real.
It is.
And I found myself at times like in a leadership standpoint, you know, there's this happened to me within the church, and then I have to deal and filter all the information. And sometimes you see, oh, it's so much deeper than this event. I'm not going to make you prove your pain over here. But we also have to see this heal over here. Like these are related, right? So this, happened. And then one of my pastors told me one time he said to me, he said, Zach, you know, this will tie in with that thought. The worst lie that people speak is the one that they believe, right? And so we see, you know, in this instance, this thought or this hurt that was very real is tied to an experience they've had so many times in their life, but even just like that formation of a belief system, it's tied to their belief system more. And then it becomes even more and more and more than what it actually might have ever been, right? So as a counselor, how do you believe everything everybody says?
No.
Like how do you push back? Like help me out of this, because like I'm like, hey, like I know it's not this. I also know it's not this. It's right here, somewhere in the middle, right? Yeah.
What you're describing, it sounds like trauma. So things happen to us that we don't. Maybe where we are when it happens, we don't know how to survive it, so we come to conclusions.
Okay.
You know, so I was hurt in the church, and nobody likes me. I'm just not going to fit anywhere. And you have to work through that. You have to separate. Okay, yes, this may have happened here, but what conclusions have you come to about yourself? You know, as a result of it, and where's the lie?
Yeah.
You know, and let's address that. So that if you get into another situation where some people look for hurt, they come into churches looking, okay, I know it's only a matter of time, you know, church was good today, but next week, you know, something's going to happen.
Yeah.
You know,
you'll find what you're looking for a lot of times, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
It's funny.
So getting people to see the opinions and those inner vows and the strongholds that they have formed as a result of trauma. And I tell people, you know, you're going to have triggers all the time. You know, triggers are like bullies. You know, they want you to respond the way that you did in the trauma, where at that time you survived it. But letting people see I'm an overcomer. Trauma doesn't have to have me. I can have it. You know, because we all experience some kind of trauma. And if not, keep living. You will. Yeah. You know, so how are you going to bounce back from that? And teaching people, you know, church hurt, yes, it may have happened, but how are you going to be different as a result of it? You know, so that's what I've done with some of my church hurt. I have done the opposite. I know, you know, I'm intentional about making sure people feel loved, and I don't do some of the things that were done to me. Right. You know, so it doesn't make me withdraw from church. It pushes me. You know, at the time it did, because I had to deal with my own offenses and unforgiveness and all of that. But the healing part of it is, okay, now what? What are you going to do? Are you going to withdraw? Are you going to say, you know, I'm not going to be a part of church at all? No, because that's not what Jesus would want. Right. And it was a part of my development, you know. So now I'm going to go back and strengthen others and say, hey, church is good. You know, we love church. You know?
And they're value determining times in our lives as you know, you and I are both in ministry. It's value determining times when we go through times that it hurts. Like, oh yeah, you know. Do you ever read The Tale of Three Kings?
No, I have not.
There's a part in it where There's they deal with the question. The author poses the question: why doesn't God just deal with the outer Saul? And he answers it. He says, because God's more concerned with the Saul in you, and a lot of times He removes the inner Saul by using the outer Saul. Just surgically, like cancer pulls it out of you. And I realized when I read that book the issues that I had to go through and process, and many of them. Let's probably say all of them. I'll say all of them. God's gonna use that. He's gonna pull something out of me. He's gonna change something inside of me. So I love how you frame that. You're putting the responsibility back on them. How are you gonna change on the inside? Yeah. Right? Maybe I was hurt because it wasn't my idea.
How about that?
Maybe it was that simple, But maybe I was hurt because of disappointment or whatever, and that expectation was unrealistic to begin with, But what about the persona of pastors? Do you think, like, where did the perfection come from? Like, did we put that? I don't know that historically,
I don't know either. I don't know, because there was a time where the pastor profession, I guess if you want to call it vocation, calling, was respected. Do you find that now it's not as respected as it was? And I think it's because of social media. A lot of things that we see, a lot of the falling of pastors is publicized. So it causes society to lose respect, unfortunately. So just building that back up, and putting the focus back on God. It's unfortunate that we arrived at this place, but we have to get back to accountability, transparency, and pushing people toward Christ and not towards me. So.
Yeah. Man, when you asked me that question, I guess I have a bunch of questions. I'm wondering if that's cultural in our society. I've noticed within the predominantly white churches, we follow the Andy Stanley model, where it's like, don't call me pastor, right? Call me Andy, So then with some of my friends in urban settings, or friends of color who pastors, I mean, they've got 15 titles in front of their names, the longer the church name, it's so funny. And I love that. I love that aspect of culture. But it is interesting, as I just even talk with my friends, the differences. You can go from one church to the next and the honor is completely different. And I don't know sometimes if I've brought that on myself in the way that I, just relate with people, I mean, specifically, we started a church, right? So we're setting the culture, and if I come in with a suit, and I would like you to call me this, then people would, but I don't, So I wonder, But.
That's funny. We have my husband pastored a predominantly white church in Beaver Falls for 4 years. And what we were used to was the pastor's wife was called First Lady in churches, right?
Yes.
So here I come expecting I'm First Lady now, right? And they're like, you're Tanesha.
Yes.
Right? And I'm like, oh, okay. So that was an adjustment.
Yeah.
So I had to decide how I was going to respond
the
to
opposite.
that. Yeah, exactly.
What is First Lady? What does that mean?
Yeah, what does that mean? Yeah,
that's so
exactly.
Funny? So you had to adjust that?
I had to adjust that, but I was okay. I'm like, okay, well, I like that. So does the responsibility change?
Right.
If I'm just Tanesha, then I'm just going to sit here and kick my shoes back and just come to church.
Right.
But that was I guess a cultural adjustment, and that helped me to see, you're Tanesha. Don't expect these people to call you,
Yeah.
And
Did you
that
have to play keyboard though?
No.
No.
Yeah,
it's like
no.
It's so funny in a lot of churches, right? It's like pastor, he's speaking, and the wife is the worship leader. We're leading kids, and here we are. Lauren's leading kids right now.
Yeah, how about that?
So funny.
Yeah.
We're fitting into that mold right now.
Yeah.
But you're really gifted at what you do, and I appreciate you.
Well, thank you.
I appreciate you.
God the glory. I thank him for it, all of it.
Yeah. Thanks for speaking the truth in love. I think you do a really good job of that.
Oh, well, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. I mean,
I work hard at it.
Yeah. I mean, the proof is in the pudding. You know, it's like we've. I can't get into stories, but like if you send somebody to somebody and it's 5 years later and they're not any better, like I don't know if this is working, but you are you're helping people, truly helping people.
Thank you.
So thank you, and I think it's just an outflowing of who you are.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
I do.
Yeah. So how can people get a hold of you?
Yeah, we have a website, and it's experiencingeden.com. And you can call our main number, which is easy 877-EZK, Ezekiel 3635.
Nice.
Yes. Those are the main ways to get in touch with us. Yep.
Excellent. And thank you from the bottom of my heart, just sharing your heart.
Thank you.
This is good.
Yeah, thank you for this opportunity. And I get to talk to you longer than what I'm used to in
we
passing.
usually have kids all around us.
Yeah.
So thank you for being on.
Yes,
Appreciate
thank you. Awesome.